There is a very quiet truth in the journey of human maturity. The hearts that are most capable of loving deeply often find it hardest to accept shallow relationships. They are not lonely because no one enters their life. They are lonely because within them exists a very demanding kind of honesty. That honesty does not allow them to call possession love. Familiarity, attachment, the fear of losing each other destiny, or emotional dependence, a soul connection. People like this have often loved greatly, trusted deeply, and hoped sincerely. They have also experienced moments when they thought they had met the right person. A look, a conversation, or a strangely familiar feeling was enough to make them believe that this was the missing piece their soul had always been searching for. But over time, when the initial emotions settled, when passion was no longer strong enough to cover reality, they began to see what they had not wanted to see before. The other person was not as perfect as they had imagined. The connection was not as deep as they had believed. And what once moved their heart was sometimes not love, but the reflection of an unhealed longing within themselves. Carl Jung touched very deeply on this psychological layer. He believed that human beings rarely see others exactly as they are. Very often, we love an image that our own mind has created. We place onto another person our missing pieces, our forgotten dreams, our unnamed wounds, and even the qualities we have not yet dared to live out ourselves. That is why some relationships seem like destiny in the beginning. But in truth, they are only an encounter between us and our own projections. When the projection fades, we do not only lose a person, we lose the entire story we once used to comfort ourselves. But when a person who has truly begun to awaken meets their soulmate, everything does not unfold like an ordinary romantic story. It is not a meeting that makes all suffering disappear immediately, nor is it someone who comes to fill the emptiness, save us from loneliness, or complete the missing parts of our life. A true soulmate does not enter our life to feed our illusions. They enter like a mirror, and sometimes that mirror does not only reflect our beauty, but also the dark places we have avoided for many years. For that reason, love between two awakened people is not always comfortable. It can be gentle, but it does not lull us to sleep. It can be profound, but it does not allow us to continue living in falsehood. It forces us to become more honest with ourselves, to look back at old patterns, fears of abandonment, desires for control, and the silent expectations we once called love. And perhaps a true soulmate is not the person who makes us forget ourselves in intense emotion. They are the person who brings us back to ourselves more completely. They do not come to complete us, but to awaken the part within us that has always been capable of becoming whole. Therefore, the deepest love is not a place where two people escape loneliness, but a place where two souls are brave enough to meet each other in truth. Part 1. Why is pain the first doorway to awakening? Awakening very rarely begins in a state of peace. It usually does not arrive when life is smooth, when everything is in its proper place, and when a person feels completely satisfied with themselves. Most of the time, awakening begins with a crack, a certain loss, a relationship that can no longer continue as it once did, a disappointment that causes old beliefs to collapse, a success we pursued for a very long time, only to achieve it and feel nothing but emptiness inside, or a life that, from the outside, appears stable, proper, and admirable, yet on the inside becomes increasingly unfamiliar. Many people imagine that awakening means becoming gentler, wiser, and more peaceful. But before clarity comes, there is often a breaking apart. Before a person can return to the truth, they often have to go through the moment of realizing that the things they once believed in, clung to, and identified with may no longer be real. Awakening does not begin with light. It often begins with disillusionment. At some point in life, a person suddenly feels that their current life no longer fits the person they are quietly becoming. It does not necessarily mean that everything outside is wrong. The job is still there. The family is still there. Responsibilities continue. Conversations still happen. But beneath that familiar surface, there is a feeling that is very hard to name, as if something alive within them is slowly leaving. The goals that once motivated them suddenly lose their meaning. The relationships that once gave them a sense of safety now make them feel as though they have been playing a role for too long. The things that once were enough to satisfy them now leave only exhaustion and emptiness behind. Jung looked very deeply into this human tragedy. He did not believe that suffering was the greatest tragedy, because suffering is something almost no one can avoid. The deeper tragedy is going through an entire lifetime without ever truly becoming oneself. From childhood, we learn how to adapt in order to be loved, accepted, and safe. We quickly observe which parts of us are praised and which parts are rejected. If our anger pushes others away, we learn to become obedient. If our weakness is seen as a burden, we learn to appear strong. If our needs were once ignored, we learn not to need anyone. If our true voice was once silenced, we learn to stay quiet in order to survive. At first, these adaptations help us survive. They are the way a young soul protects itself from a world that does not yet feel safe enough. But over the years, what was once a defense mechanism slowly becomes a mask. We begin to mistake the role for our identity. We no longer remember who we were before we learned how to become someone easier to accept. We call suppression maturity. We call forgetting ourselves responsibility. We call long-term exhaustion reality. We call a life without vitality stability. But beneath all those layers of adaptation, there is still a true part of us that has never disappeared. It has only remained silent. It has waited. And at some point, it begins to ask questions we can no longer avoid. Who am I if I no longer need to prove my worth? Who am I without roles, titles, achievements, or the recognition of others? Am I living truthfully? Or am I only living according to a safe image? Am I truly loving? Or am I only holding on to relationships that help me avoid loneliness? Am I choosing this life? Or am I merely continuing it because I am afraid to change? Awakening begins when a person no longer has the strength to keep deceiving themselves. They realize that the life that once helped them feel safe may also be the very life keeping them asleep. The things that once gave them certainty now begin to feel too tight. The masks that once helped them be accepted now become heavy. Relationships built on performance no longer feel warm. Conversations without depth are no longer enough to nourish the soul. They no longer want merely to be praised, recognized, or needed. They want to be seen, to be met in truth, to live without having to betray themselves. But before a person can truly be seen by someone else, they must first dare to see themselves. This is the first doorway of awakening. And it is also the hardest doorway to step through, because seeing oneself does not only mean seeing the beautiful, strong, kind, or mature parts. It also means seeing the fear, the dependence, the anger, the wounds, the jealousy, the need to be loved, and all the parts we have tried to hide. Pain becomes a doorway not because it destroys us, but because it causes what is false to fall away. And when everything unreal begins to collapse, the true person within us finally has the chance to speak. And when that true self begins to speak, outer life can no longer continue as before. We may still do the familiar work, meet the familiar people, and move through days that seem unchanged. But inside, a quiet movement has begun. We can no longer easily compromise with the things that make our souls smaller. We no longer want to smile when we truly want to cry. We no longer want to say, "I'm fine," just to make others feel at ease. We no longer want to maintain a beautiful image if the price is losing our own truth. That is why awakening is often lonely. Not because we become distant from life, but because we can no longer continue living within the old layers of falsehood. Some people will not understand this change. Some relationships will no longer fit. Some places that once felt familiar will suddenly become too small. But that does not mean we are lost. Sometimes, that very feeling of not belonging is the first sign that we are beginning to return to ourselves. Part 2: The painful truth behind relationships that no longer have emotion. Most people do not enter love with an inner world that is already whole. They enter it with unnamed emptiness. Then one day, they meet someone who suddenly makes everything inside them feel alive. That person has stability where they still feel unsteady, freedom where they still feel bound, and calmness where their mind is still full of storms. And in that moment, they believe they have found the one meant for them. But from Carl Jung's perspective, that intense feeling is not necessarily love. Many times, it is a projection of the unconscious. We are not truly seeing the other person. We are seeing the missing, suppressed, or unlived parts of ourselves appearing through their image. Jung called this the relationship with the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine energies within every human being. When we have not yet reconciled with that opposite force within ourselves, we easily begin searching for it outside. And then we think we are in love with a person, when in reality, we are fascinated by the forgotten part of our own soul being reflected through them. That is why some relationships feel like destiny in the beginning. The other person seems perfect, mysterious, profound, captivating, strong, or gentle in exactly the way we have always longed for. But time never allows illusion to remain still forever. Eventually, that person begins to appear as a real human being, limited, wounded, selfish, conflicted, and carrying unhealed areas of immaturity. When the layer of projection falls away, we feel disappointed, even believing that we have been deceived. But in truth, the other person did not deceive us. Our own mind turned them into a screen onto which we projected the things within us that had not yet been healed. That is why so many relationships repeat the same cycle: infatuation, disappointment, an attempt to change the other person, and then either leaving or staying in emotional coldness. Some people leave in search of a new object for the same old projection. Others stay, but lose their vitality, comforting themselves with the belief that all love eventually fades. All passion dies out. And maturity means accepting a relationship that no longer has a soul. But the problem is not that deep love does not exist. The problem is that what they called love from the beginning was not built on truth, but constructed from lack, fear, expectations, and unconscious wounds. A person who has awakened begins to see this difference. They know that being loved is different from being truly seen. Being loved may warm the heart, but being met in truth is what makes the soul feel recognized. For that reason, they no longer easily enter connections, merely to soothe loneliness. They would rather be alone in honesty than stand beside someone in a crowded relationship that is empty of soul. Part 3: Why do you feel as if you have known the right person for a very long time? There are encounters that do not begin with noise, but with a very quiet feeling. Not the kind of excitement that makes us lose control, and not the kind of attraction that makes us rush to possess someone. When a person who has gone through many layers of inner awakening meets a soul that is truly in harmony with theirs, The first thing they often feel is not drama, but recognition. It is as if a very deep part of them has known this person before, even though the rational mind can find no evidence of it in memory. That feeling is very different from ordinary infatuation. In a love filled with inner lack, we are often drawn to another person because of the things we believe we are missing. We want them to notice us, to choose us, to reassure us that we are special in their eyes. We fear losing them even before we truly understand them. But when the meeting comes from consciousness, we are not chaotic inside in that way. There is emotion, but no loss of direction. There is attraction, but we are not swept away. There is curiosity, but not the craving to be filled. An awakened person does not see the other person as the final missing piece that will complete their life. They no longer enter love like a starving person, searching for shelter from loneliness. They have learned that no one can save them from themselves, and no one is responsible for carrying the entire weight of their self-worth. Therefore, when they meet the right person, what appears is not the feeling of, "This person will make me whole," but something much quieter and deeper. This person has also gone through an inner journey that I can feel. There is a kind of familiarity that does not come from the past, but from the depth of the soul. We feel that the other person is not only speaking through words, but through everything they have overcome. In their eyes, there are traces of long nights spent facing themselves. In their calmness, there is the shadow of times when they broke apart and then learned how to stand again. In the way they are present, there is a truth that does not need to announce itself, and that is what makes us feel close to them. Not because they resemble everyone we have known before, but because they are no longer trying to perform a role that is foreign to who they truly are. A soulmate in the deepest sense is not someone who comes to erase every emptiness within us. They are not responsible for healing us in our place, nor do they turn our life into a fairy tale without pain. What they bring is far more important: the permission to be ourselves. Beside them, we no longer feel the need to constantly perform strength, hide our fears, beautify our cracks, or pretend that we are completely fine. They see both the light and the darkness, both our maturity and the parts of us that are still learning how to heal. And instead of making us feel judged, their presence makes us feel recognized. But precisely because of this, meeting the right person can also be frightening, because the person who truly sees us often dissolves the places where we used to hide. They do not need to criticize us, but the honesty within that connection makes what is false inside us become clear. We begin to recognize old defense mechanisms, fears of abandonment, habits of control, and wounds we thought we had already overcome. A deep encounter does not only awaken love, it also awakens the parts of us that have not yet been healed. Jung believed that encounters like this have the power to transform a person, not because they always lead to a permanent ending, but because after we have once been seen at a deeper level, we can no longer easily return to connections that only touch the surface. Once the soul has been recognized, being admired, needed, or possessed is no longer enough. And if both people are mature enough not to run away from that truth, the encounter can open the door to a very different kind of love. A love that is not born from lack, not fed by control, and not sustained by illusion. It is the love between two people who have dared to walk through their own darkness, so that when they meet, they are not looking for a place to hide, but finding a space where they can continue becoming more truthful and whole. Part 4: The person who reflects your true self, both a gift and the greatest challenge. Jung once said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is a reaction, both are transformed. That statement is not only beautiful in its imagery, but also touches very accurately on the nature of a deep connection. When two conscious people meet, love does not only bring warmth, it also shines light on the parts within us that we have not truly healed. A soulmate does not appear to comfort our ego. They come as an honest mirror, not a mirror that reflects only what is beautiful, lovable, and easy to accept, but a mirror that makes us see the very things we usually avoid: our need for control, fear of abandonment, defensiveness, habit of pleasing others, punishing silence, emotional coldness, pride, and even old wounds that are still quietly controlling our reactions. This does not mean the relationship is toxic. It simply means that we are stepping into a space where avoidance is no longer easy. In unconscious relationships, we often blame very quickly. When we are hurt, we assume the other person is wrong. When we are afraid, we want to control. When we are triggered, we turn emotion into a battle. But in conscious love, we learn to pause and ask ourselves, is this truly coming from the present moment? Or is an old wound within me speaking? That very question is what makes love both beautiful and difficult. If the other person needs silence, the fear of abandonment within us may awaken. If the other person wants to come closer, the fear of losing freedom within us may react. But instead of attacking each other, two mature people can name what is happening. When something unconscious is spoken with honesty, it begins to lose its power over us. That is the quiet work of conscious love, separating the past from the present, projection from truth, and our own wounds from the person standing before us. Conflict, then, is no longer merely a sign of collapse, but becomes a doorway to deeper understanding. Being triggered is no longer only a reason to leave, but becomes a teacher guiding us back to ourselves. But not everyone can endure that mirror. Some people meet the right person and still run away. Not because the love is not real, but because the truth within that love is too powerful. And the most painful lesson is this: we cannot awaken on behalf of another person. Sometimes, loving consciously means knowing how to let go. Not because love has ended, but because true love does not turn anyone into a possession, nor does it force them to walk a path their soul is not yet ready to enter. Part 5: Mature Love, where you are loved without having to lose yourself. The love that Jung points toward is not the story of two incomplete people finding each other in order to become one inseparable whole. It is the encounter between two individuals who are learning how to become whole, stepping together into a space where both can be transformed without having to lose themselves. Jung called this image the conjunctio, the sacred union. But this union is not dissolution, not disappearing into the other person, but two people who are inwardly grounded enough to meet each other in truth. In unconscious love, people often search for a savior. They hope someone will soothe their insecurity, fill their emptiness, confirm their worth, and promise that they will never have to face loneliness again. But no human being can carry that role forever. When we turn the person we love into medicine for our wounds, love gradually becomes a burden. Care turns into demand. Closeness turns into control. The devotion that was present in the beginning slowly becomes covered by expectations and fear. Conscious love does not operate that way. It does not promise that two people will never hurt each other. It does not erase uncertainty, loss, or change, but it gives both people a foundation deeper than false security, the ability to remain together with the truth. In this kind of love, two people do not cling to each other in order to survive, but choose each other because each other's presence makes life more meaningful. They do not choose from lack, but from recognition. It is a place where freedom and intimacy can coexist. Two people can love deeply without possessing each other. They can be bonded without turning each other into extensions of themselves. They can commit without trying to trap the other person inside a fixed image. They understand that human beings are always changing, and that mature love is not a vow to control the future, but the choice to be honestly present in the now. A relationship like this is not easy at all. In fact, it requires more courage than unconscious love, because within it, there is no longer any place to hide. We cannot keep blaming forever, cannot hide inside the role of the victim, and cannot use psychology or spirituality as a mask to avoid our real emotions. We must learn how to show up. Listen, take responsibility, and speak truthfully about what is happening inside us. The sign of conscious love is not found in grand promises or intense emotions that spiral out of control. It is found in the way two people face the moments when they are triggered. Do they become defensive or curious? Do they attack or listen? Can they sit with each other's pain without rushing to fix it? Can they challenge each other without shaming each other? Can they rejoice in each other's growth without feeling threatened? When two conscious people meet and continue choosing wakefulness together, that relationship becomes a sacred space. There, they are not only loved, but also seen, not only comforted, but also invited to grow. Love is no longer a place to fall asleep inside illusion. It becomes a path that leads both people back to a more truthful, free, and whole version of themselves. And before we bring this video to a close, I want you to hold on to one very important truth. Meeting the right person is not always a beautiful story in a comfortable way. Sometimes, it is not the person who makes you forget all your wounds, but the person who helps you see those wounds more clearly. It is not the person who comes to complete you, but the person who makes you realize that wholeness has never existed outside of you. It begins within you. From the moment you dare to look directly at yourself, dare to recognize what true love is, what projection is, what a deep connection is, and what is merely loneliness, searching for somewhere to cling. If there is one most important message this video wants to leave behind, it is this: mature love does not take you away from yourself. It does not make you smaller, more fearful, more dependent, or cause you to lose your inner voice. True love does not require you to perform, does not require you to hide your darkness, and does not require you to become a perfect version of yourself in order to stay. It invites you into truth, and within that truth, you are loved, challenged, seen, and called back to a deeper version of who you truly are. But also remember this: not everyone who enters your life with intense emotion is your soulmate. Some people only come to awaken an unhealed part within you. Some relationships exist only to show you how you once loved from a place of lack. And there are also encounters that, even if they do not last forever, still change you forever. Because they help you understand that love is not a place to hide from yourself, but a path that leads you back to yourself more honestly. So if today you are lonely, do not rush to see it as failure. Perhaps it is the necessary silence that allows you to stop searching for someone to fill the emptiness, and begin becoming a person grounded enough to receive true love. When you no longer need someone to complete you, you can finally meet them as a free soul, not as a need.